Hi, everyone. Welcome to Taking the Ick Out of Sicklet. Today's event is being hosted by BookTalk. BookTalk provides virtual events for readers to connect with each other, creators, and authors. Their mission is to create spaces to broaden people's bookshelves and engage in thought-provoking discussions that bring forward diverse perspectives in the digital bookish community. Today, we're here to discuss Lillie Lainoff's debut novel, One for All, and later on, we'll be joined by another panelist of authors, and we're going to discuss chronic illness representation in books. And I'm Brenna. I run a few social media book blogs. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Chronically Brenna. And then I'm going to introduce the wonderful Lillie Lainoff. So first of all, Lillie, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so happy you're here. Okay,
Thank you
so
so
this is
much.
really cool. Lillie Lainoff is a former Division I NCAA fencer for Yale, which is so impressive, and is the founder of Disabled Kidlit Writers and the winner of the 2019 LA Review Literary Award for short fiction. Her nonfiction has been featured in the Washington Post Outlook and other places, and she received her master's in creative writing prose fiction from the University of East Anglia.
Leah, you got it.
Yeah, and One for All is her debut novel. So, Lillie, do you want to, talk about your book and tell us what it's all about?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for hosting this event. I'm really excited, one, to talk about One for All, but also to celebrate chronic illness representation in literature by all these other incredible chronically ill authors who are my colleagues, but also like my writing icons. So it's very cool. One for All, for those who don't know, it's right here, came out on Tuesday. It's a gender-bent reimagining of The Three Musketeers, in which a girl with a chronic illness, and that chronic illness is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS for short, trains as a musketeer and finds secrets, sisterhood, and self-love. And that's my little 30-second elevator pitch. But One for All is about a lot more than that. It's about sisterhood and found family and what it takes to learn to love yourself in a world that tells you that you shouldn't. It has so much chronic illness representation, and which makes me incredibly happy. It's a book that is about a chronically ill character overcoming not their disability, because that's not something that people overcome. Disabilities don't disappear into the ether, but about overcoming ableism, whether that ableism is internalized from what society has taught my main character, Tanya, or externalized ableism. She faces a lot of things that disabled and chronically ill individuals face now. It's not only in 17th century fantastical France that somebody experiences things like best friends ghosting you and issues with family in terms of feeling like a burden. And I use burden in quotation marks because I think it's an incredibly loaded word, and it's disabled people aren't burdens, which is something that Tanya learns. There's also discussion about what it means to be a friend and form friendships while chronically ill, and how Tanya learns that needing help isn't weakness, and that needing to rely on her friends for certain things isn't a weakness, which is something that was really important to me to portray, because it's not something that I think we see enough of in literature, especially literature about, or the very limited literature that we have about chronically ill teenagers. And she also learns that maybe she can be desirable as a chronically ill girl, and that maybe guys will like her, which I can't go too much into because that's a little bit of spoiler territory, but people will have to read the book to find out. And I think, I'm just going to kind of segue. Should I just segue into talking about my inspiration for One for All, maybe? Or
That was my next question. So Absolutely.
Oh, so I'm sorry. If you let me rant about One for All, I will just go.
No, that's what you're here for. That's what I want you to do.
Um, so I started writing One for All at the end of 2016, but I didn't really start writing it in earnest until 2017, 2018. Because I was working on my senior thesis and I was definitely not drafting a novel when I was supposed to be working on my senior thesis. So I had one of those light bulb moments that us authors are constantly trying to convince everyone aren't real, because, and to be fair, they really aren't. Writing is about crying at your computer and being so frustrated with the empty document and writing something at 3 a.m. that reads really well, and then you wake up in the morning and then it's just complete gobbledygook and you just want to throw your computer against the wall. But One for All was very much that light bulb moment for me, in that I was talking about novels that I wanted to write with my literary agents, and the idea of retellings came up, and the idea of gender bending the Three Musketeers just immediately popped into my mind, because as a fencer, I grew up with lots of fencing movies. So The Princess Bride, The Man in the Iron Mask, Mulan, and only one of those movies has a girl with a sword in it. And when I was younger, I was the only girl in my fencing class, which now is very different. And there's so many more women fencers today, which is really exciting for me to see as somebody who fences and coaches. But I really wanted to be able to give little Lillie the story in the movie, that element that she wanted of girls with swords. So I thought that One for All would be the perfect venue to do that. And I started writing, and many years later, I have the final product, which is an incredibly surreal feeling to see your childhood dream manifested as something that you can buy for $18.99 at major retailers. It's really strange, but also incredible and such a privilege. And I feel so incredibly lucky.
Well, I feel so incredibly lucky that you've written it and that you're here. It is the first book I've ever seen or read with POTS representation. And as someone who has that, it's so incredible to see. And I just know that other kids growing up and, not seeing themselves in media, they're finally having that representation that we wish we had, when we were a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I completely agree.
Okay, so there's plenty of characters in your book, but what was kind of your favorite character, right? And what was, the most difficult to write?
I feel like I have to cover my, the ears of my book, so that way the sisterhood won't hear me when I talk about favorites, because I feel like that Portia will come out of the book and hurt me if I say anybody but her. But Tanya, I think, was my favorite character to write, because how could she not be? In the way that I think that, I mean, I love all the girls. I love Portia. I love Dea. I love Aria. They're all incredibly fun and witty and ferocious and so much fun to write. But Tanya specifically allowed me to write about something that I never thought I was ever going to get to write about, because I never wrote stories or novels, for that matter, with disabled main characters or chronically ill main characters until I was in my 20s. And I know that that sounds young to a lot of people, but if you think about the fact that I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old, that's actually, 2 decades really of internalized ableism and thinking that people like me couldn't be the heroes of their own stories. So writing Tanya was wonderful, but she was also by far the most difficult character to write because there's so much of me in her. I mean, Tanya is not me, but she is part of me. And it's incredibly difficult to put so much of yourself on the page and out into the world. And I think that anybody who writes a novel and puts it out into the world will agree that doing so is an inherently vulnerable act. But because Tanya is so close to me, there was an extra element of vulnerability, I think, that readers are now reading about Tanya, who again is not me and lives in a fantastical version of 17th century France and duels and ball gowns. And obviously, I'm not going anywhere dueling in ball gowns, but a lot of the feelings that she has are incredibly similar or identical to the feelings that I had as a chronically ill teenager. So it was both a blessing to be able to write those moments, but also incredibly difficult.
Yeah. How I would describe One for All, it's about a girl becoming her own hero and discovering that she's already enough just the way she is. Do you feel that you've kind of been going on this same journey as Tanya in your real life?
Oh, that's such a good question. And first of all, thank you, because that's exactly what I was going for. And I'm so glad that came through. I think that writing One for All definitely taught me how to love myself, or at least to try to love myself, because I think that existing as a chronically ill and disabled person in a society that tells you that you're not worthy and you're not enough, you don't just automatically wake up one day and say, I love myself, things are great. You have to choose to say, okay, I'm going to reject what people have told me, what society tells me, and I'm going to attempt to love myself. And that's a choice you have to try to make every day. And it's a difficult one. And sometimes you really don't want to have to make that choice. But I think that One for All gave me the courage and the bravery to want to continue to try to make that choice every day. And I
lost like connection. So give us 1 second because you were answering so great and it's frozen for everyone.
Oh no.
R.I.P.
Okay, we're back, good to go.
Okay. Do we know where I cut off, or am I just going to continue blabbing about One for All, because I can do that?
Let's just go back. You said that the East City Bookshop, they actually were doing the fight scene from One for All. That is the most iconic thing I've ever heard of. And I wish I could have witnessed it in person.
Yeah. So the in-person book launch on Tuesday, which was held at the Yard, which is across the street from East City Bookshop, because we wanted to make sure it was an accessible venue. Two of the booksellers reenacted a duel from One for All, and it was incredible. I personally have never reenacted any of the duels from One for All or practice them while I was writing, because one of the big things in fencing, for, well, at least for my fencing coach in particular, but it's also used throughout sports in general, is visualization. So I'm very familiar with planning out fencing and bouts in my head. And so this technique is practicing what you're going to do in your mind before you actually do it, or seeing it. So I've done that for years because that's what my fencing coach had us do for years. So it comes in really handy when you're writing a book, when you already know how to play a fencing scene out in your mind, and I can just write it down because I have the foundational basis and all the terminology that I need. So the short answer is, have not done any of the reenactments of the One for All scene yet, but I'm not going to say no to never doing it, because I think that would be really cool.
I know on Twitter you were talking about recreating the book cover in the dress. I would
Mhm.
think maybe when you do that, do like a little fencing move or something in a little video.
I might have to. I'm trying to find a way because Tanya's sword, which is so beautifully brought to life by Kevin Tong and Rich Dees on the cover, is very specifically described in the book. And I don't really have that sword. I mean, I have swords that were given to me. I'm trying to see if I have them. Yes, here's the sword that, so this, um, let's see, this is the one that I took the one for all pictures with.
Mhm.
This is what regional fencing competitions gave to 13-year-old Lillie when she got silver or bronze at events. Best sport ever.
That's so
Oh,
awesome. The only sword I have is this really fun plastic sword I got on Amazon, but
mhm.
I think it's iconic, so I still love it.
Mhm. So I think that I might have to try to find a replica of Tanya's sword. That way I can properly do cosplay because everybody, I've had so many incredible responses to the book dress that Jacqueline Fergans did. But I don't have the right sword yet. So I'm going to get it right one day.
Okay, so I know when you first got on here, you said you got some really awesome news. Would you be able to share that with us?
I can't share it with anybody yet. Like everything in publishing, or anything related to publishing, uh, things and news you usually find out about anywhere in between 3 weeks to 2 years from now. But just know that One for All things are happening behind the scenes and they're really exciting. And um, I cannot thank the readers of One for All and everybody who supported One for All, the real life sisterhood of the Stab, and the real life order enough, because all of you have made all of this possible. Um, it's been incredible and surreal and wonderful. And again, I know that I'm repeating myself from earlier, but I feel so incredibly lucky to have such incredible readers and to have the response that we've had so far. Even though it's only been a few days, it feels like a lot longer, and it's just so special.
Yeah, so would you say release week has been really good so far?
It's been really great, but also, and I had heard this. I'm going to put the sword down. Sorry, one second, everyone. Um, I had heard from other authors that there's a drop after the book launch because, of course, because there's so much excitement, so much nervousness. And then all of a sudden your book is out and you go, oh my gosh, I've been working at this for however many years and now it's on the shelf. And now other people are reading it who aren't reviewers or early readers. It's kind of like, I will say Wednesday did very much feel like how you would feel as a little kid the day after your birthday, but times 1,000. um, because you're so excited. You're like, birthday, it's a day all about me. And then the next day it's, well, yesterday was the day all about me, which sounds ridiculous and awful and self-centered. But I now finally have the opportunity to, I'm going around and like signal boosting and congratulating all the other authors who had books come out on Tuesday, which feels like every single author in existence. I mean, my gosh, there's like 40 something books that came out, or YA books alone that came out on Tuesday. But I'm finally getting to catch up on reading and writing, and it's very exciting. And getting to do events like this, it has, I'm so excited. It's been great. It's been exhausting, but I mean, I can't complain. I can't complain. I'm living my childhood dream. I can't complain.
Yeah. So now we are going to be joined by our other panelists. And so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce everyone. First, we have Emily Lloyd Jones. She is the author of The Bone Houses and grew up in a vineyard in rural Oregon, where she played evergreen forests and learned to fear sheep. She has a bachelor's in English from Western Oregon University and a master's in publishing from Rosemont College. She currently resides in Northern California, where she enjoys wandering through redwood forests. Her young adult novels include Elusive, Deceptive, The Hearts We Sold, The Bone Houses, and the forthcoming The Drowned Woods. Her debut middle grade, Unseen Magic, was published in February. So welcome, Emily. We're so excited to have you on. And next, we have Heather Cammons, the author of The Moth Girl, which also just came out on Tuesday. She is the recipient of an Artist Fellowship from Massachusetts Cultural Council, and her short fiction has appeared in Gumisa and elsewhere. The Moth Girl is her first novel. She lives in Western Massachusetts with her husband, 2 cats, and the variety of woodland creatures who stroll through her yard. Welcome to. And last but not least, we have Alicia Dow, who is the author of The Kindred, which came out pretty recently. Also has the prettiest cover ever. She is a former pastry chef and librarian. When not writing, you can find her having epic dance parties with her daughter, baking or reading. Thank you all for joining us today for this event. We are so excited to have you, and I have a few questions for everyone. First, what are some misconceptions or misrepresentations you have found in chronic illness in fiction? Whoever wants to start can go.
I mean, how long do we have?
We have 20 minutes. So.
This is a question I feel like we could spend an entire hour on.
Yeah.
I've found so many misrepresentations of chronic illness and disability, not just, of course, in books, but in TV shows and films. It's always very disappointing because most often it's the villain who is the disabled character. And I'm sitting here like, really? This is like 2022. Do we have to do this? So I love representations that are inspiration for other characters and don't have the magical cure at the end. So yeah, those are the 3 big ones that bug me.
Yeah, for sure. I don't like magical cures at all either.
Yeah, I think just any representation where the sick or disabled character is objectified or used as a plot device for other people's development, which unfortunately has been the norm that I've seen. And the other thing for me is like fitting illness into a neat arc where somebody gets sick, then they get worse, and then they either like die tragically or are magically cured and everything's fine and just goes back to normal. And especially when you're talking about chronic illness, that's just not how it works. And so I've seen specific chronic illnesses treated as like terminal illnesses and just like really not represented well, really not shown in an accurate way of like what it's like to actually be a person who has a chronic illness.
For me, it's at what everyone else said, definitely. But also that there's this kind of perception from the main character who treats another character who has chronic illness or is disabled as an absolute burden. And it's just kind of using this language over and over and over again while you're reading it. And you just, I don't know, I like try not to throw the book, but I will throw the book. It really bothers me. And that they're just like, this person is a burden and I can't handle it and I can't do this. And there's no conclusion to that. It's not like they're going to grow or anything. It's just kind of not handled and it's just there. And I find that really disappointing. And you can always tell when it is written by someone who has never known or experienced disability in their life. So that really bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, How have you tried to address, some of this in your own writing?
This is fun because I think that we all have so many thoughts about this, but it's kind of like, how much do we say? Can we go on long tirades about how awful representation is? But I just wanted to echo really quickly before I answer your most recent question. I wanted to really quickly echo what everybody else has said, but also to say that there's this very strange conception that only young white boys are disabled. Like, there are disabled people of color, there are chronically ill people of color, there are chronically ill girls, there are chronically ill girls of color. Like we get the same representation, the very limited representation over and over and over again, which is incredibly frustrating. And I was going to also say that, disabled characters or chronically ill characters dying as a plot device, or just being a plot device, or having their symptoms be plot devices. Just the disabled character as a cardboard cutout of an actual person. I think that that's my biggest frustration. And I think that in terms of what I do to address that in my work is I write directly from my own experience with POTS. So I would like to say that I think that it's incredibly difficult to run into those tropes when you're writing from personal experience. Obviously, it's possible. That's not to say that chronically ill people can't perpetuate ableist tropes. I think that it's really important. And I think that because we all write for teenagers, we all know the importance of providing accurate representation. Not that adults don't need accurate representation too, but especially for teenagers who might be dealing with a first-time diagnosis, or who really don't know anybody else who might be chronically ill, although they probably do. It's just that other people they're not necessarily open about being chronically ill. I think that it's really important for us to get it right. So something that I do is I have a lot of chronically ill critique partners who read my work and tell me when they think that something doesn't feel right, or if maybe I need to readdress something. If I'm writing a secondary side character who's not a point of view character who has a disability or chronic illness I don't have, authenticity readers are super important. Not using hospital websites which just list symptoms as your reference, because I've seen that happen before and it just is not good. Because the experience of chronic illness is so much more than a list of symptoms.
I think that's a really good point, like showing chronic illness not just from the perspective of a bolded list, but from all the different ways it intersects with a person's life, because it really does influence everything about how I approach the world, especially these days. And I feel like a lot of people who've never experienced disability or chronic illness personally don't realize that I always have a little voice at the back of my head calculating, like, is it time to take medication? What time of the day is it? Like, what's going on? And I just have that going on. It's just a regular part of my life. Like, I don't even think about it anymore. And I feel like having those portrayals, particularly in books, which put you in the mindset of characters, are really valuable, especially for teens who may be experiencing this for the first time.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, there's a lot going on. Having chronic illness means that I'm constantly, just like you, thinking about it, making sure I'm on schedule, making sure that I'm taking things at the right time, but it's also a level of introspection at all times as well. So when I'm writing a character and I'm trying to I try to write different characters with different chronic illnesses or some that don't have any, but it's been very interesting over the years to see how I've written that and what I have to take out to be a little bit more accessible for people. And I get told that a lot, like you're writing about it this way and that you're introspective and you're doing this and that. And it's too much cerebral, it's too much in the head and you have to get out of that. And I don't know how to. So it's really, really weird that it's a process where I have to learn how to do it the way that I think non-chronically ill people would approach it. I don't know. So I've been learning to do that, but generally I would rather write what I know. And I feel that it's important to write what I know, and I feel like it can be, relatable, and also that it resonates with readers who are dealing with what I deal with. So there's a lot going on. I try to keep my hands a little light when I'm going, and I can see where I can add in here and there, because there is, not all illness is a monolith. Everything is different, and people are going to look at it and read it a bit differently each time. And some people will say, "Oh, that didn't work for me, and that's not how I approach these things. So I don't like it or whatever," and that happens. But I try to stay as authentic to my experience as possible. And regardless, I always have authenticity readers and sensitivity readers as well.
I think it's so, part of the reason why representation is so important, not just to those of us who are being represented, but, fiction and real life, like the narratives we tell in real life spill over and reinforce each other. And so, something that I experienced when I was a teenager and I had just been diagnosed with lupus is like, people would say, "Oh, you're so brave," or like they would have these stories in their heads about what my experience was. And there was just like no real curiosity about what I was actually going through. And so I think like just bringing that, real emotion and real authentic experience to it, and just showing people like, this is what it's actually like. You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Like, this is what it's actually like to go through this.
Yeah, and Heather, you do that so beautifully in The Moth Girl.
Oh, thank you.
People need to specifically. I'm thinking about certain scenes that I don't want to spoil for readers, but you definitely explore that specific element in The Moth Girl so well.
Thank you.
My coffee is on the way, so hopefully I can read it as soon as possible. These are all wonderful answers. And now what's one piece of advice you could give to aspiring chronically ill and disabled writers?
I would say that I think this is good advice for any writers, but it goes double for chronically ill and disabled writers, which is to not take any writing advice too seriously, and to know that whatever works for you works for you. There's not one way you have to do it. There's not, things that you absolutely must not do. If it works for you to write for 10 minutes a day, or to write like for an hour every couple weeks when you have the energy, do that. Like, you don't have to write every day to be a writer. And also, like, personal side rant, like audiobooks are real books. So I just want to put that out there. Just figure out what works for you, experiment, and that's the best thing to do.
I would definitely tell all writers, but especially disabled and chronically ill writers, to never let writing get in the way of self-care. I've done that occasionally, and it has a way of catching up with you. So always take care of yourself first. The writing can always happen later.
I think that I completely agree with both points. I hate the advice, write every day or you're not a writer. It's ableist, it's classist, it's sexist, it's so many different things. I just want to throw it away, set it on fire. It has nothing to do with actual writing, and gatekeeping writing benefits no one at all. It doesn't benefit authors, it doesn't benefit readers, and it doesn't benefit publishing. But something that I would definitely suggest, it's something that's been very helpful for me personally, in both my journey as a chronically ill writer, but also just as a chronically ill individual. If you don't have access to friends or acquaintances in real life who are chronically ill, you can use social media like disability Twitter and chronic illness Twitter, and finding people who understand what you're going through is incredibly helpful, especially when you have other chronically ill writer friends, because sometimes you really just need to complain to somebody who gets it when you say, I had 1 hour for writing this week that I had set aside, and I don't have the spoons now. I don't have the energy now to write during that time. And, other people can, sympathize kind of, but I mean, chronically ill writers get that. They get what it means when you say, oh my gosh, I have an awful migraine and now I can't look at my screen when I'm typing. And how am I, how am I going to figure out how to write? And there's just a level of understanding and solidarity there that is beneficial both as a chronically ill person, but also as a chronically ill writer.
I agree with everyone. Such good points. I think my thought is, again, do what makes you happy and do what makes you excited. Writing is hard. It's a lot of time. It can be a lot of different things, and maybe you don't have the energy. Maybe you don't have that moment right then. But when you're excited about it and you want to, go for it. I think those things, they lace themselves through your words, and you can, when you're reading it, you feel so happy about it. And it's really just, for me, when I write, when I'm excited, I write when I'm happy about it, and I feel good. And if it's like feeling super tedious and not worth it, then, if you can, just step back, take care of yourself, and always, inhale art to exhale heart. So whenever you can, just refill yourself and take care of yourself.
Mhm. Now we have some Q&A questions from the people watching, and this is for everybody. What are the chronic illnesses / disabilities that are represented in your books?
This is just quick fire. We're just gonna yell it out. Okay. One for All has postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome representation. Also, I mean, I also don't really talk about the anxiety rep, but Tanya has anxiety. Yeah, those are the two disability and illness representations.
The Bound Houses has chronic pain representation, and my middle grade, which just came out 2 weeks ago, also has anxiety. So yay for anxiety rep.
Yay.
Okay, so the Sound of Stars has anxiety, and I put in hypothyroidism. The Kindred, sorry, I have to think about this. I think there's also anxiety in there. I have bipolar disorder, but my next book is the one that will feature that. So I'm hoping that I will get there. I'm learning how to write in this way. It's different.
I'm so excited for that. There's so little BP rep. Oh, that's gonna be so good.
So the Moth Girl, it actually uses a made-up illness. It sort of has fantastical properties, so it makes the main character float. It's kind of a metaphor for just how, untethered to the earth you can feel after a diagnosis. And it's inspired by my experience with lupus. So it's not a direct analog for that, but definitely in terms of like the unpredictability of it and just how weird it can feel.
Awesome. And I know I've only read One for All, but I'm so excited to read all of these and get to experience the representation, because any book with disability representation is my kind of book. Okay, so this question is for Lillie, but the other authors can also weigh in. Did you get any pushback or resistance when you went to go query your book because it had this disability representation, chronic illness representation?
Oh gosh. So I you said query, right? So I was in a position where I was already agented when I wrote One for All. So the book that I queried and found representation for, The Keeping House, it died on sub, and I don't like using the word died on sub because I think that books have very long lifespans, and I would love to see that book find a home. But that book has an almost entirely disabled cast, and I did definitely receive a bit of pushback while querying. No pushback that I received while querying could ever compare to the pushback that I received while on submission. And I spent over a year on submission with One for All, and over 60% of the passes were, we love this book, we love Lillie, we love the story, we love the writing, we love everything about it, but we don't think there's readership, or we don't think it's marketable. And that was the response over and over and over and over again. And the first 2 times or so that I received those responses, I didn't really think much of it. But when you get that same response over and over again, you start to realize what marketable and readership are code words for. It's because, there's this misconception that there aren't disabled and chronically ill readers. There are a lot of us. We like reading books. I mean, we spend a lot of time in waiting rooms and doctors' offices, and we read a lot. But also, there's this misconception that non-disabled and non-chronically ill readers won't want to read books about chronically ill characters and disabled main characters, which is also a lie, because I mean, heck, the title of this panel, Taking the Ick Out of Sicklet, none of our books are sicklet, because I would define sicklet as the romanticization of terminal and or chronic illness. But those books have chronically ill characters, and those books sell really well. So obviously there's a huge readership for stories about chronically ill characters. It's just a matter of trying to get our stories that are told by us and our words out into the world. Yeah, I can't, it's one of those things where I can't really go into more specifics about what I experienced, because one, it's painful still, even 3 or 4 years later. And it's also something that doesn't just magically go away after you're published. You still face a lot of ableism in publishing, even after you're published. You face reviewers who don't get it, and book reviews and trade reviews who use language that might not be okay. And you kind of just are told that you need to grin and bear it. And it's one of those things about publishing that I can see is starting to change slowly, very, very slowly. But I've tried to share as much as I can about my story about being on submission, to create further transparency for other disabled and chronically ill authors, because it's never okay, even with publishing professionals. It does not matter how high up the editor is, it is not okay for you to receive ableist rejections. Ableism isn't okay. So, okay, I'm going to end my little rant right now.
Did any of y'all want to weigh in on this as well?
I don't think that I got specifically ableist feedback when I was on submission. I did have, I will say, a publishing industry professional at one stage of the process who did refer to my book as sicklet, which was a huge turnoff to me because I hate that term with a white hot hatred, um, for all the reasons that Lillie mentioned. So, you know, it was really important for me to align with people who really were understood what I was trying to do, weren't going to like try and whitewash anything. So yeah, that can be challenging, but you know.
I can say that I got pushback on all of mine. I think when you write disabled, chronic illness, fat, Black, queer, all in one book, they're like, that's too much. I need it out. And so far, I try to appeal. Sometimes it doesn't work. I think with The Sound of Stars, I had a very similar process like Lillie, where it was the pushback, and there were some really weird things that happened with that. But actually, probably the most difficult one I've had so far was anything I've done with Bipolar Rep across the board. It's, we love your writing, we love the book, we love all the concepts of it, but insert very strange reason that you would be like, okay, but that's like, that's not, I don't know what that means. I don't know. So it's getting better. I think the more intersections you have as well it can be a lot. It can be a lot to handle. And I feel like there needs to be way more support for authors when going through the process, but especially chronically ill and disabled authors, because I feel like it's not where it should be yet. It's gonna get there, but it's not where it should be yet.
Can I pop in really quickly to say to anybody who's watching, who's writing, who's chronically ill or disabled or neurodiverse, and is writing kidlit, the Disabled Kidlit Writers Group is open to all, and it's a really good resource if you're struggling while you're on submission and you want to talk about what you're going through, or if you just need advice or sounding board. There are lots of people there. The group is locked, but it's not to gatekeep, it's just to keep out spam accounts. Anybody who requests to join the group will be accepted.
I will say, yeah, I've noticed more and more traditionally published books with disability representation coming out, and the amount I've seen this year is very encouraging. But there's definitely still a long way to go. And I see a lot of disabled authors also go the self-publishing route, because then they don't have the publishing industry telling them, well, your book is great, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally in awe of self-published authors. The amount of additional work that they do to promote and market their books, and to find editors, and to design covers, and to all the coordination, I think is just incredible. And for me personally, I couldn't do it, and I knew that self-publishing wasn't the right route for me, because with my chronic illness, I knew that I would never write again. I would just be so focused on trying to coordinate everything that I couldn't do it again. But I think that, yeah, you're completely right. There's so much good chronic illness and disability representation out there and coming out, and there needs to be more of it, because I think that, you know, it's the difference between yay, we get 2 books a year, and yay, we get 8 books a year, woo, kind of thing. But yeah, I do think that it's getting better, and 2022 is looking like it's going to be a really good year.
okay. So what are your favorite go-to book recommendations that feature chronic illness representation?
I mean, besides everyone's books here, one I read recently that I really enjoyed was The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. She's always an amazing writer, but their latest book just has some great chronic illness rep.
I'll shout out Cursed by Carol Ruth Silverstein, who it is about, I think she's a 13-year-old with rheumatoid arthritis. And for me, that was the first book where I really saw the experience of being in a body with a chronic illness rendered on the page in a very vivid way. And I will say I'm currently in the middle of Lillie's book, and I feel the same way about that. I just think you do such a good job of really like showing us what it feels like to be, to be a person with POTS.
Thank you. And my go-to recommend, it's funny because my go-to recommendations are always The Sound of Stars, The Bone Houses, and now The Moth Girl. Those are always my go-to recommendations. I think that, I will always say Six of Crows, but people are much more aware of that novel than of other novels because it just exploded and now there's a TV show. So I think it's more about reminding people that there is chronic illness representation in there, because I think that sometimes people forget. But it is very good. Marie Kniechkamp's books are phenomenal. I'm like trying to look back at my shelf because I've got so many. Katie Gardner's books, Brave Enough, Finding Balance, the Unbroken anthology, which is edited by Marie Kniechkamp, is one of my go-tos for recommendations because there's such a wide array of perspectives and disabilities and chronic illnesses represented in there.
I'd say everyone's books. Sorry. I'm in Germany right now, and it's like, 1:30 in the morning, so I'm a little blank. But I am so looking forward to getting Lillie's book. It hasn't arrived in my German village yet, but I'm crossing fingers it's arriving soon. And there are so many books that I love, and a lot of them haven't come out yet. I'm a huge fan of Ray Summer. And I'm sure a lot of people know them. And it's adult sci-fi and YA sci-fi. And I think in YA sci-fi, there's like this beautiful moment happening where I think you can get to explore so much and represent so much. And I'm really looking forward to how what that's gonna look like in that genre going forward. And it's just like, there's so much, and I'm continually excited. I'm always on the verge of excitement because there's just so many good books coming out that feature rep that I've been craving for most of my life, and it's just incredible.
Okay, I can't not mention my favorite because I like to make it my personality. But Sick Kids in Love by Hannah Moskowitz is my absolute favorite. Both the main characters have a chronic illness, and it's a cute love story, and it's so happy. It's like the opposite of Sicklet, and it's just like a cute, happy romance book with amazing representation. And it's just like what I wish I had when I was 15 and first struggling with my chronic illnesses. So the panel is almost over. Does anyone have any last things they want to talk about?
I was going to say, other than go read everybody's books of the authors who are on this panel, because all the books are very good. I know because I read them. But I was going to say also that Unfortunately, the publishing is capitalist, and the way that this world works is capitalist. So if you want more chronic illness rep, the way to get that as a reader is to support books that already have chronic illness rep that are on the market. That way, more publishers pick up other books with chronic illness rep. So everybody at every stage in the process can play a role in making sure that we get more accurate and authentic chronic illness representation. I mean, we're never going to be able to undo the harm of a lot of the sicklet, but we can just flood the market with accurate chronic illness representation by showing publishers that readers really want this. So go and buy books and request them at your libraries, and recommend them to your friends and family.
Yeah, and post them on social media. To all my book friends out there, you better be posting about them. I'll be watching. I want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming on here and speaking with us. And thank you so much, Lillie. I know everybody is so excited about your book, and the amount of people I know that are just so beyond happy to have a YA book with really like feminist characters and amazing disability rep, and it truly means a lot to everybody. A reminder to go check out BookTalk on social media, and that they are actually having a panel on retellings next week.